So this one says, a function's local scope variables are not available anywhere outside that function, regardless of the context it's called in. Okay? So, where did we leave off? I already forgot. Somewhere over here. Do you want to start?
No, because that's boring. Yeah, we're declaring first fun, which is a function, and not running it immediately.
Okay. So we're defining this function, and we have the function body here. We're not running it yet. Okay, Dan?
And we're declaring second.
Yeah, we're creating the second function. Skipping over it.
And we're calling expect. Using as a parameter this function.
Yeah,
And we don't know that it's necessarily going to be executed.
yeah. But I'll tell you that yes, it is actually going to be executed.
Mhm.
But it doesn't, there's nothing here telling us for sure that it's being executed. But I'll let you know that inside that expect function, it will execute this function. So, Ginny, so this function is being called. What happens next?
I don't know where the two throw brings it to.
Well, we're still actually running this function. So we called this function, but when we call a function, we first need to enter into the body of the function and execute what's inside.
Okay, so then it's calling second function, or second FN within there.
Yeah, so it's going to call that function, and then Josh.
Goes back up to the second function declaration and executes the code, which would be a problem.
And then Altamir, what happens? So we're executing this. What happens?
Would that then follow for the throw error?
Yeah, so this is probably our error because local to first function is, is in a different scope. So we don't have access to local to first function. So we're trying to assign something that doesn't exist, it's going to throw an error. So that's where this to throw comes from. Okay? Any questions for that one? Okay. Aisha, do you want to do the next expect?
Function's defined and it declares first function.
So we define this function, expect somewhere in the internals is going to call it, and then Cameron, what happens once it's called?
It calls first function.
It's going to call the first function, and Eddie, what happens next?
So inside of first function, up on line 64, local to first function is set to the string first.
Yep. Okay, Chris, what happens next?
And then it calls the second function again.
Yeah. And then Abdi, what happens next?
It runs second function and assigns the local to first string to be first and assigns that to actual.
Well, this is in a different scope, though, than this one, still. So, as you would read it, it first looks, is this variable in this scope? No, it's not. As you read it, as you would read it, not necessarily how it's executed, you look then to the parent scope, which is not this one. This one is not in the same scope. You can even see when you collapse them, they're siblings. So it will look out into this scope here, and then it will look out into this one. And nowhere have we defined the local to first function. Does that make sense?
So the hierarchies are sort of defined statically,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's called lexical scope, if you want the Wikipedia word for it. But it's as you would read it. So like where it's visually on the page. Yeah. Okay. So we don't have access to this. It's going to throw an error.
And then expect is called with actual equal to null.
Awesome. So actual is null, again, because before each it, we are resetting our null, our actual value to null. Great. Next one. This is a little bit longer.
Can I ask about the last one too?
Yeah.
Is it by any chance a matter of order? Like if second fun was declared before the first fun, you know, would you be
So
able
you're
to call
saying
it there?
If we, for example, put this function above,
Yeah, just above there. That's
no, it still wouldn't work because it's about the block that it's in.
I guess I'm confused because, you know, when I write a big page code or something,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll have other functions on that same level that I call, you know,
Mm-hmm.
side there, and I'm missing why they're outside of scope in that case. But I think you said it pretty clearly there, and it's just not clicking.
Yeah. So when you put a variable inside of a function, it's local to that function. And when you do a lookup, for example, this is a creation, right? We're declaring this. And this is a lookup, right? We're looking up the value of that function. It's first going to check in its own block. Okay, and we haven't declared anything here. We haven't assigned anything. So it's not there. And then it's going to look up. Okay, and so up is in this function. And when I say up, I don't mean like up the lines, but up the scope tree, so up into the next parent function.
Sure. So if I can, like, if we're at this step here,
Mm-hmm.
when we're calling it from the perspective of the first fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want to assign this variable. Okay, I did that. Now I'm calling second function. Oh, what is second function? I don't have that. Let me go up a level.
Mm-hmm.
But then why doesn't it see the function right there, var second fun?
It does see this.
Oh, it does.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah. Because second fun is being declared in a parent scope.
wait, yeah, wait. So then why would it throw an error?
Because
What-
you're actually looking for the variable name and not the function.
So local, the first function, is the thing that's throwing the error. This one.
Oh, wait.
Well, actually, this one, sorry. That one's throwing the error. Because it's first looking in here for something called local to first function, and it's not there.
Oh,
And
so
then it
okay,
looks
okay.
here, and it's not there.
Okay,
And then
so
it keeps going up until it says, oh, well, it's not there, so.
Okay, so I think so. The reason that the second test there that we were looking at fails is because it calls first fun, which goes into second function, and then second function still does not have access to local to first fun. Okay.
But I see what you mean about the order, and I think that's something important to point out, is the order, because it seems like this wouldn't have access because this is underneath, right? That's what your assumption was, and you
Yeah,
thought maybe
there's
the error
some
was something
weird
to do with that?
situation where that comes in.
Yeah, and so that's another part of scope that comes into play, which is when things are defined and the order in which things are defined. So if because first function isn't run until down here, we actually have executed all of this, right? We declared all of this, right? Remember that? And then we called first function, and we go up here. So second function has already been defined.
Sure.
Yeah, that's why that works.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Awesome. Okay, so the next one is, if an inner and outer variable share the same name and that name is referenced in the inner scope, The inner scope variable masks the variable from the outer scope with the same name. This renders the outer scope variables inaccessible from anywhere within the inner function block. Where did we leave off actually? Okay, Michael.
Yep. We are making an anonymous function.
Well, actually we start here.
Okay, cool. We are defining a variable of same name, setting it equal to outer.
Yep, so we're defining the variable same name, setting it to outer. What's the next thing that happens? Who's next? Did you just go?
Yeah, I did, but I can go again.
No, that's okay. So it's either Ben or Aisha.
I'll go. A function's defined.
Yeah. You define a function. Okay, Altamir.
I was just reading the description, trying to understand
Yeah.
what it is. Okay, so we defined the function, then we called it.
Yep. And then we call the function. Josh.
We evaluate the function body.
Yep.
So we set same name to inner, which replaces same name equals outer.
Yeah. So we declare a variable with the exact name as this variable same name. We reassign the value here. And then,
Does it
Vinny?
matter that you're redeclaring it?
No, not really.
It's gonna jump down to 91 and.
Well, we have this one here first.
Oh. Oh, it's setting actual to same name,
And what is same name?
inner.
Inner.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Ryan.
Expect is called.
Okay. So we exit this function. We go to expect. You want to take a stab?
Sure. Actual at this point is still inner.
So actual is inner. You have a question about that?
So would that be a case where if we didn't want that behavior, we would use let and create a block scope?
This is similar to the example with let. So instead of creating the block scope, we're creating a function scope, and we're doing what's called masking. So we're masking the value. Because remember, you first look at your most local scope to get the value. If you don't have it, then you go up. But if you have it, then you also have one in your parent scope, you only find the one on your scope because you don't look up if you find a value. Does that make sense? So it's like, what is this? Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Just like that. Okay. That make sense to everyone? What if we did this? Oh wait, that's
You'd
what I do.
copy the next
Already.
example?
Yeah. Whoops. Maybe I've done this too many times. Okay, so, oh, you have a question?
Yeah. Sean's saying he's just checking his understanding. If line 87 was declared with a let, would we still get the same result because it's scoped to the block?
Yeah, it would still be the same. The let in this case doesn't matter. Let in this case doesn't change anything because we have a function scope, and the let keyword only, so the let keyword creates what's called block scope, which is something that we didn't have before. So for if-else statements, we could have a scope for that now with let. Before that, if-else statements, if you declared a variable in a loop or in brackets or in a switch statement or anything like that, it wasn't local to that block. And so that would cause kind of some weird behavior, especially if you had like a lot of if-else statements and reassigning variables and stuff like that. And there's also hoisting that happens, which we'll talk about. And so it could be misleading. And so we introduced let. By we, not me at all, I was not involved in that. Let was introduced into the language, which creates block scope, which enables us to have variables that are private to something other than a function. Before that, all we had was private function scope. Any more questions about this one?
I'm still not quite getting it. Because it's looking at actual, right? And actual was defined as null before this test. Is that fn function returning actual to the outer scope?
So that this variable lives in the
Oh, because it's a global variable, well,
Yeah.
in this kind of context.
Yeah,
When we change it inside, it's changed outside.
Yep.
Okay, never mind.
exactly. So it's reaching up, changing it up there, so it will be accessed anywhere else, it would be the same value. Yeah. Cool. So line 94, if an inner and an outer variable share the same name and the name is referenced in the outer scope, the outer value binding will be used. So this is kind of the opposite of what we just did. And where did we leave off? Dan?
Sorry, which line are we on?
95.
95.
That's what we just said.
It looks really similar, doesn't it?
So declaring a variable, same name.
Yep, so we could declare the variable, same name, we assign it to outer. I'll skip ahead. We are defining a function, and then we call the function, and then what happens?
Ooh, thanks for giving me fun stuff. So inside the function body, we declare the same name variable, and we give it the value inner.
Yep, so same name, we assign it to inner, and then it exits. Let's see, Cameron, what happens next? So we were just here, we just ran this.
So line 100,
Mm-hmm.
set actual equal to the value of same name, which is outer.
Yep, which is outer. And then we should expect actual to equal
Outer.
outer. Cool? All right. So this one, a new variable scope is created for every call to a function, as exemplified with a counter. So let's check this out. Chris, you want to start?
Sure. There's a variable created fn,
Mm-hmm.
which shows a function.
We create this function, save it in a variable, and then Abdi, what happens?
Then we run that function.
We run the function, so we jump into that function body. And Jamie?
And then we're setting inner counter to 10, basically.
Yeah, so we're setting inner counter to 10 because at this point, inner counter is undefined. And then Michael, what happens next?
We are taking inner counter, setting it to inner counter plus 1.
Mm-hmm. So inner counter is?
Can it? Yeah, it can redefine itself in the same line, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would make it 11.
Yep.
And actual to be set to 11.
Yep. And then so we exit the body of this function. We find ourselves on line 113.
So we expect that to be 11.
Yeah, we'll expect that to be 11. Okay. This is going to seem repetitive, but it's actually very important. Aisha, do you want to keep going? Or like I'm like, do you want to? But really what I'm saying is you have to. Or you don't have to. Strongly encouraged.
The function declared is, yeah, the function's declared again.
Is this declaring or calling?
Invoked.
It's being invoked, yes. So we call the function, and then we hop back into the function body. What happens next?
And now we're dealing with inner counter is 11.
So what is this line doing?
So we say the inner counter is actually inner counter or 10,
So what is inner counter?
11.
Where does it say that we're defining 11?
When we did the when we define on a 113, line 113.
Yeah. So that's a common misconception. But what happens is whenever you call a function, you create a brand new function scope every time.
So then it's 10.
It's 10.
So then we set inner counter to be itself plus 1, so then it's set to 11 again.
It'll be 11. Actual will be set to 11. And we expect actual to equal 11. Awesome. Any questions about that? So this is another like kind of gotcha, but very important. Every time we call a function, and when we get to closures, this is going to be really, 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 really drilled into your head. Every time we call a function with, you know, the parentheses, invocation operator, a brand new scope is created. Some people call it an execution context. And so you can think all the variables in that scope, when the function is called, it's going to be initialized as whatever they are, in this case 10, and then when you do it again, it'll be initialized again. So they're separate, they don't talk to each other, they're just the two different worlds of scope. Good? Okay. Let's see. All right. Let's do this. How many more do we have left? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's just do one more, take a break. Has it been 30 minutes? Probably, right? I lose track of time. I can talk forever, though. Okay, so next one is a new variable scope is created for each call to a function, as exemplified with uninitialized string variables. Okay, so I think we left off with you, Ryan.
Function is named and declared.
Yep, function is, named and declared, and then it's called. We execute the function body. Dan, what happens next?
We're executing the function body. Sorry.
Yeah, we're executing the function body.
You're declaring local variable and not giving it a value.
Yep, we're declaring this variable. When it's not declared, it holds the value undefined. And then we check if it's undefined.
Since it is undefined, that'll return true and we'll execute that statement, and so we'll set actual to the string alpha.
Exactly. And then since we entered it into this if block, we will not enter into this else if. So this gets skipped. And we go down to the next line. What happens here, Cameron?
Local variable is set to initialized.
Yep. And then, Eddie, what happens?
Then we're going into the expect. And actual will equal alpha?
Yep. Then we're going to call the function one more time. We're going to enter into the function body. We're going to initialize this local variable. What happens next, Chris?
The local variable is initialized, so it will call the else statement actual equals omega.
So we're actually so when we call the new function, it's going to create a brand new scope.
So it'll be undefined again?
Yeah, it's okay. So then what will happen? Abdi?
Once it's undefined, we'll set actual to equal alpha, string
Yep.
alpha.
And then we go down here, we set local variable to initialized, but this is still alpha.